even after Jesse's been gone for a little while, but I'm still in my brain. It's still Jaron. So I am also excited about pillars of success in love, marriage, and life that I have been sharing over the past 4 sessions. I say sessions like I'm in a counseling session, but the past 4 um, episodes that where I've been meeting on Facebook Live. And so this time, well, before I go into this time, I just want to do a little review about what has been covered so far. And I'll tell you again while I am doing these pillars, if you're joining for the first time, I believe that there are some fundamentals that make marriage and love work in relationships. And even though there are many, I came up with 7. Actually, Jesse and I had worked on these together. And so we came up with 7 that we thought were really crucial to make relationships work. I mean, the pillars work for us. They work for the couples that we worked with. And even people who have not been in sessions with us, meaning family, friends, what have you, I have noticed elements of these fundamental pillars in their relationship as well. So, excuse me, in a way, they're like a few universal principles of what makes love and marriage work. And so far, 4 have been covered. The first one, commitment. You know, when you first come together, you make that promise that you're going to be there for each other 100%. And then after the drugs wear off from the honeymoon stage, then and reality hits, that is the time that the commitment part of your relationship is tested. And many couples meet the test. Some have difficulty. And so that pillar is something to pay attention to and to notice how strong it is and to notice if it needs to be strengthened. And the second one is intimacy, really getting to know each other and experience each other at a deeper bond. Physical intimacy, sexual intimacy, emotional intimacy, all the layers of intimacy that nourish the bond. And then forgiveness. It is easy to offend our partners innocently. It's also true that sometimes they're big offenses. And if a couple wants their relationship to work, the person making the offense, it's really important for them to make amends. And whether the person who makes the offense makes amends or not, it's important for the person being offended to forgive so that they're not holding on to resentment, because that affects their mental health and it affects their physical health as well. And last time, the pillar covered was about empathy, really understanding another person from their experience rather than the person who is listening, or at least trying to listen. So pillar number 5 is what is going to be covered this time, and it is called respect. So in thinking about sharing respect with you, this pillar with you this time, I thought about a story that I want to share. It's a story about a couple. I'm going to call them Reggie and Regina. Now, Reggie and Regina have been married for 27 years, so they've been together for a long time. They are empty nesters. They have 2 grown. They're college graduates. They're out of the home, and actually, one of them still lives out of state. So Reggie and Regina are at home together in their empty nest situation. So one change is that it's just the 2 of them together. One thing that has not changed is one dynamic that they have that is representative of how the pillar of respect needs to be strengthened in their relationship. And that it's that particular topic. So let's start with Reggie. Reggie's complaint about not feeling respected started all the way back after their second child was born. And it was a time for the two of them to decide how they were going to co-parent. Well, Reggie's complaint was that he was not taken into consideration when decisions were being made about how they were going to work together. He said that Regina was controlling, she made all the decisions, and she didn't involve him. And he also complained about the fact that he called it nagging, that she was harping on him about not participating and keeping the home in order because she was um, being neat and orderly was one of the values that she had. So they would argue about that and so they argued about that when the children were at home, um, and they argue about it now. So what they didn't understand was that since they kept arguing about the same thing over and over again, they were really talking about something that was on the surface. There was something deeper beneath the surface that they needed to be aware of and attend to. Because the more they argued, each time they argued, they added an additional layer of resentment between them that built a wedge between them. And many therapists call that wedge an invisible divorce. So they're together under the same roof, but when they have those arguments, they are pretty much separated and they're living in two different worlds. So the pillar that is missing is the pillar of respect. So when I think about respect, of course, I wanted to check out what Webster had to say. So let me just read what Webster said, that respect is a regard and consideration for the feelings, wishes, needs, concerns, rights, and traditions of others. So that's one definition. The other definition is treating another person in a way that shows that you admire them and that you care about their feelings. So when Reggie and Regina had arguments, neither one of these definitions that I just shared was present. What was missing? The regard and consideration for each other's feelings. So when couples argue, the argument is more about who's going to win. It's all about winning. And if anyone feels like they win the argument at the time, and maybe they do, the problem is they've lost the war because they are because it's a step toward turning away from each other. The other thing that was missing with Reggie and Regina was this, even though they admired each other about other things, when they were in these arguments, and sometimes they were brutal, there was no way that they showed any admiration for each other because they were telling each other what the other was doing wrong. And they were seeing each other and experiencing each other through the lens of negativity. And the other thing that's missing is that when people argue, when couples like Reggie and Regina argue, during that exchange, they are not expressing that they care about each other because they're focused on what they don't like. And that creates a problem. So let's look at how both Regina and Reggie define respect, because they both want it, but they want it in a different way. So for Reggie, when Reggie thinks about respect, what he's looking for first, I mean, there's other elements that he's looking for, but what he's looking for first, he's looking for acknowledgement for what he brings to the relationship. Now, Reggie is a good provider. I mean, he went to school, he's got his degrees, he's got a good job, and he and Regina have worked together to build a wonderful lifestyle together. So he wants credit for that. And when he hears more about what he's doing wrong than what he's bringing to the table, he feels disrespected. That's one of the ways that he feels disrespected. And the other thing that he says is, when Regina is frustrated with him, the way that she talks to him and criticizes him, uh, in that way, he doesn't feel respected as well. So, what about Regina? What is the first thing that she's looking for in terms of respect? So, what Regina says is that, I would feel more respected if Reggie would just hear me out. When I'm telling him what I'm feeling and what I'm needing, he's interrupting me. And sometimes he's telling me what I need, which is different from what I'm trying to tell him. And it's very, very frustrating. So if Reggie and Regina were going to turn this around, there's some very specific things that it would be important for them to do. First, they would have to be in an environment where they could have a conversation rather than an argument. And what I know for sure is that many times couples try to have a conversation in the heat of the moment after they're triggered. That never works. That never works. They have to be in an environment where there's an element of safety or a foundation of safety so that they can hear each other out, talk to each other in a way that the other person can hear, listen in a way that the other person feels heard. So when they have that dynamic going, then they have an opportunity to learn something about each other. And sometimes when people get in touch with sharing their heart, they get in touch with some things that they weren't aware about themselves because they were so wrapped up in the energy of the argument. So they needed to, in an environment of safety, both Reggie and Regina and other couples would have an opportunity to discover what the other person is experiencing. It's something like what I was talking about last time, empathy. When you have a respectful conversation, you're in an environment where you can see, hear, feel, and understand what the other person is saying through the lens of their experience. And through that lens, both partners have an opportunity to really hear what it is the other person needs, why they need it, how they need it, and then they can decide whether they're going to give it or not. Now, usually, what people want is realistic. Usually, and and I'm not talking about couples who are in abusive relationships. What I'm sharing with you today, is not for those couples. They need another step before we could have a conversation, or I could have a conversation with them about this. I'm talking about couples, everyday couples who get stuck in arguments and they want to turn things around and they just don't know how. So if both partners have an opportunity to have a respectful conversation and get to know each other, then when they're making a decision about how to move forward, then both parties' concerns will be addressed and the outcome will be both and rather than either or. Because when people are arguing and they're in a power struggle, it's usually you against me rather than you and me, so that we can move forward as a we. So so that's what Reggie and um, Regina discovered. So when they so a couple of things happened. So they made a decision because they were tired of arguing over and over and over again and having these negative feelings, because beneath the surface they really, really loved each other. They just couldn't get past this part. And since they were building up all of these layers that were leading to a thicker wedge between the two of them and this underlying resentment, they said they did not want to go into their golden years arguing. And it's really hope that they made that decision, that they didn't want to do what they were doing over and over again. And so they needed to make a decision, and they did. They needed to make a commitment, pillar number one. They needed to make a commitment that they were going to follow through on doing something different. And they also needed to implement what they discovered and repeat it over and over and over. So here's what happened. Reggie and Regina, they made the decision. They made a decision to stop the arguments and to start communicating. They were going to start communicating about hearing and understanding each other. They were going to listen to each other, hear each other out so that they could hear what the other person was needing beneath the surface of their frustration, because the frustration was an alarm that something was off and that they were reaching out to each other, even though poorly. They were reaching out to each other because they wanted to fill the gap from what was missing. They also needed to, in their conversation, talk about not only what the other person needed, but how they needed, like I was saying earlier. And when they made that decision, they got to work. So here's what the work entailed. The conversation environment that I had mentioned earlier, they discovered how to do that. They discovered how to, if one of them got triggered, the person who got triggered, they had a way to calm themselves down so that they could be totally present and hear the other person out. They also got clear about their message. They got clear about what it is that they wanted. Because one thing that I have noticed over and over and over again is that when couples are trying to communicate about what it is that they need, they really don't talk about what they need. They keep talking about what the other person isn't doing. And so in that environment, what they repeated over and over again was, in this structured environment, this is how we're going to talk to each other, and this is how we're going to listen to each other. That was a respectful environment and process for them to be successful. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Anytime someone is doing something new, they're not going to get the results overnight. Now, even though Reggie and Regina wanted that to happen, it didn't happen for them. They discovered that they were human and that change takes time. They were so dedicated to having a new result and to getting to the other side that they practiced diligently for 90 days. For 90 days. Now, they didn't have 90 days of arguments. They had 90 days of practicing and preparing for talking things through, no matter what it was, especially the things that would lead to arguments. So they did the work. And they have wonderful results. So talking to Reggie and Regina now, this is what they would say. They said, in addition to both feeling more respected, they fit the definition of what I shared earlier. They both say that there's more of an expression of regard and consideration for each other's feelings. They do feel the admiration. They really like each other. Actually, they love each other and they like each other and they do admire each other. They didn't get to that part because they were flooded with all these emotions about not working the other things through. So they got in touch with that. They had more conversations about what it felt like to be loved and cared about. They were able to talk about each other's love language and attend to each other's love language. There's more that happened. They had more fun. There was more intimacy. And then even more, the other four pillars were strengthened. The pillar of commitment, they maintained their commitment to turn things around. They continued to deepen their experience of intimacy. They Um, if they did hurt each other's feelings, they did the amends process and did the forgiveness. And using this process of dialogue, they developed more empathy for each other. So they had a lot of benefits. So this was not an either or outcome. This was a both and outcome. And they're feeling closer than ever. So that's Reggie and Regina's story. So I'm curious about your story. Can you relate to Reggie and Regina? What is it like for you when your spouse or your mate does not show respect for you? What is it like when you try to have a conversation about it? Or let me back up. What is it like, or how difficult is it for you to be respectful when your spouse or mate disrespects you? Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, be honest. How difficult is it for you to be respectful when your mate is being disrespectful to you? On a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with how respect is expressed in your relationship? Now, I'm sure that there's areas that you're feeling really good about in terms of how you're treated by your mate. And there may be 1 or 2 areas that you're not feeling respect. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning there is no disrespect, 10 meaning it's off the chart. What happens when you talk about it? Usually, when there's a conversation about it, it's not a conversation, it's usually an argument. Is that what happens for you? Are you able to talk about what you're feeling in the moment and what it is that you need? Or does communication break down like it did for Regina and Reggie before they discovered how to address their issues differently and in a respectful way? What would your relationship look like and feel like if there was more respect? If you have a lot of things working in the relationship and you have one thing that is not, the brain is going to focus on what's not working, and more of the attention and energy is going to go to that. And how satisfied are you on a scale of 1 to 10 on how both of you work through the situations when either one of you feel respected? So Reggie and Regina, when they started off, in the beginning of their story, they were not satisfied at all because they kept having the same argument over and over again. And it could be about the slightest thing. It could be about the slightest thing. So know that you need to have respect in your relationship. And respect goes both ways, because Reggie in the beginning was only focusing on how disrespectful Regina was to him. And he was paying less attention to how disrespectful he was to her during arguments. So, would you like to see the success that Reggie and Regina had? It is doable, and um, many times when couples are taking that new step and they try to do it on their own, there are pieces that are missing to help them to bridge the gap. And when they know what the pieces are and they're prepared to take the journey, it is more doable for them to bridge the gap from feeling disrespected to, since we're about the pillar of respect. So they need more pieces to bridge the gap from feeling disrespected to feeling more respected. So that is why I have designed and offering complimentary telephone consultations to support couples to have the opportunity to move beyond understanding. I know so many people, including myself, like over the years, I've taken like so many classes and so many trainings and what have you, and sometimes overloaded myself with all of the information that I had. And I could only take in so much at a time. So some of the learning I had became shelf help instead of self help. And so having information and awareness is important, but it's not enough. It's important to have the opportunity to be aware of all the steps that need to be taken to successfully bridge the gap. And so when I think about these 7 pillars, and we're on pillar number 5 today, it's like mastering one of the pillars or strengthening one of the pillars. I mean, that means that is a big step. But think about it, if you have all 7. Right now, if you had all 5, if think about if you it's almost like having like 7 a table that has like 7 legs on it, and if one of them is broken, if all 7 of them were sturdy, you know how sturdy that table would be, right? I think that was a decent metaphor. Sometimes I get my metaphors mixed up. So anyway, so imagine what it would be like if you had all of these pillars strengthened in your relationship. Your bond would be deeper. You would have some of the outcomes that Reggie and Regina had. So if you would like the steps that will help you to bridge the gap from where you are to where you want to be, feel free to schedule a complimentary consultation with me. It is free, and it is an opportunity for the two of you and me to look at your situation, and I can share with you the steps to bridge the gap for you. Um, Reggie and Regina did it, and I would like to support you to do the same. So, thank you so much. So let me just review. So far, we have covered 5 out of the 7 pillars of success in love, marriage, and in life: commitment, um, intimacy, forgiveness, empathy, and respect. 2 more to go. Looking forward to connecting with you next time. In the meantime, I'd love to talk to you. Take care.